battling government red tape, I have eventually been given permission to come here, the bowels of the archives, to see an original copy. It's a strange place. The air seems stale, and there's a feeling of decay. Like...
This way, girlie. I know what you're looking for. Yeah, girlie, that's what you're after.
Yeah, that's it. An act to constitute the Commonwealth of Australia, 9th of July 1900. Whereas the people of New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Queensland and Tasmania, humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God.
Now, come off it, Alex. That's a bit rich.
I'm just trying to make the point that the Australian Constitution is out of date.
But it isn't.
Of course it is. It was written in the days of the horse and cart.
So what?
It's outdated. It sounds like it was written in the Middle Ages. I mean, listen to this. Be it therefore enacted by the Queen's most excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Lords spiritual and temporal...
It's a legal document. It's not meant as bedtime reading.
It's irrelevant.
Oh, now that's where you're wrong. This is at the core of everything we do. Our money, our telephones, the radio stations we listen to, the laws of the land, they're all affected by the Constitution.
But it's not working properly.
Of course it is.
It needs to be changed to be brought up to date.
It is up to date.
Murray, please. Wait till you've seen my report, huh?
I think you're barking up the wrong tree, Alex.
Just press the button marked play, will you?
All right.
It is reputed that Wally Hardman, reporter extraordinaire and on-the-spot correspondent for all the federal debates at the turn of the century, is at 124 years of age, still alive and well and living in this nursing home. If this is true, then we should...
Stop fussing, young flippity gibbet.
I'm not going to take much more of this, Mr. Hartman.
On your bike.
Mr. Hardman?
What do you want? Back before there was any real talk about federation, the states as we know them now were 6 separate colonies. Well, countries, really. They were all part of the British Empire, but they fought and bickered among themselves like a mob of kids. The result was a bloody mess, if you pardon my English. Now, there were customs barriers on all the border crossings, a collection of tiny, inefficient armed forces, and the greatest hodgepodge of a railway system you could ever imagine. And we're still trying to sort it out.
I had no idea it was as bad as all that.
Oh, it was a disaster. Anyway, the first moves to do anything happened in 1883, when all the colonies got a bit towy about the French and German colonization in New Guinea and the Pacific. So they formed a bit of a committee with representatives of all the colonies to discuss the situation. And a few years later, they met again. This was in 1889. Of course, I was just a young whippersnapper at the time, but the Herald sent me to cover the story. Anyway, old Parksy got up at the opening and really gave them all a serve.
Parksy?
Sir Henry Parkes, Premier of New South Wales. Oh, tough as nails. Oh, real rough diamond, that's him there.
All right.
Anyway, old Parksy didn't beat about the bush. It's bloody stupid, he said, for all the colonies to be biting each other's backsides. We've got to federate, and that's that.
Were those his exact words?
Yes, more or less.
Did anyone take any notice?
Oh, my oath. after the meeting, a few of them got together over Easter aboard this boat called the Lucinda. 3 or 4 days, and as many barrels of port. They came up with a draft federal constitution. They borrowed a bit from America and Canada and other places, but it was a good effort, and virtually a blueprint of the final one.
But I thought federation came much later.
Oh, it did. They went on arguing about it for years, but the turning point came in 1897. I was working for the Bulletin by then. Senior political reporter, they called me. But I still had to pay my own train fare down to Adelaide. These 3 bods, Downer, Barton and O'Connor, were given the job of drafting the actual constitution. Oh, it must have been a nightmare.
Come along, Barton, old chap. This deserves a drink.
Mr. Barton, Mr. Higgins has just been addressing the committee. He reckons the Federation won't work.
Oh, he's not flogging that old horse again, is he? I think we better postpone that drink down.
Yes, looks like it.
What's your name, lad?
Wally Hardman, sir, from the Bulletin.
Right, Wally Hardman, follow me and bring your notebook. This could be interesting.
Then let's forget the whole idea.
What do you mean, Higgins?
What I mean is that splitting the powers arbitrarily between the Commonwealth and the state is a recipe for disaster.
Why?
Because there is no single central authority. We are laying a path for centuries of argument and conflict.
Rubbish!
If we are to be one nation, then we must have one government, not 7 of the wretched things. I say scrap this draft constitution.
Absolute rubbish!
We've just got to point out to him, Trevor, that his position is unacceptable.
Unacceptable to who, sir?
Well, to the entire movement, of course. We've got to compromise. We've got to bow down to the wishes of the smaller states, or they won't join us, and we'll have achieved nothing.
Are you sure, sir? You're not just trying to win the day for the principle of free trade?
Are you accusing me of some sort of shady deal, Trenworth?
If it's free trade, Barton, then Victoria's down the drain.
Open your eyes, man. We're not talking about free trade versus protection. That's a problem for the federal parliament to resolve. What we're talking about here is the very principle of a federation. You know as well as everyone, there's no future in remaining as we are.
Just so long as it's understood.
Good God, Trenworth, as it is we are scarce half made up. The damn Queenslanders are too concerned with their precious sugar to even send a delegate. And over in the West, they're still holding out for better terms. If Higgins continues with his ratbaggery, he'll put the wind up the whole thing and we can kiss a unified Australia goodbye for another century at least.
I'll see what I can do.
Remember, it's all in a good cause.
I didn't think you were going to get it through for a while.
Tact and diplomacy, my boy. You just need to know who to squeeze and when, and you can win every time.
I see.
Well done, Barton. I think the end is in sight at last.
Mustn't count our chickens just yet.
Perhaps not. But at least we know that Victoria and New South Wales are batting for the same team. More or less.
You're right. Even that is grounds for celebration. Gentlemen, charge your glasses. I give you the Queen.
Queen. The Queen.
And our new federal constitution.
Constitution. Constitution.
The 1890s. They were grand times with great characters. They knew how to get things done.
I suppose things were simpler then.
Well, yes and no. The population was smaller and communication slow, but there were great conflicts, a lot of opposition. Still, they stuck to it.
Yes, and succeeded.
Well, we know that now. And they didn't waste any time. The public voted on the Federation in 1899. The British Parliament agreed to it in 1900. Queensland and Western Australia saw the light in 1900. And it was made official on the 1st of January 1901.
There must have been some celebrating on that day.
Yes, there was a party or two. I was working for the Age at the time. I managed to get myself into the thick of things, as usual. That's me there, behind the bloke with the wig. Of course, no one realised then how this country would progress. It's a miracle, really.
Yes, but don't you think the Constitution is showing its age?
No, not a bit.
But as you said, things have progressed. It's out of date.
It's a grand document. It's the work of brilliant men.
Yes, but they weren't able to...
I won't hear a word against it. They were brilliant men. Brilliant. Yeah, don't let them change a word.
A man after my own heart.
You're both wrong.
That may be your opinion.
And be reasonable, Murray. No one doubts that those old blokes did a brilliant job, but that was nearly 90 years ago. Things have changed, but the Constitution hasn't.
Yes, it has. It's changing all the time.
How?
Through the actions of Parliament, through the High Court,
That's
through...
not true. All they do is find ways around the Constitution.
You're splitting hairs.
You don't have to believe me. Just take a look at the way things work out in practice.
This is Parliament House, Canberra, the seat of the federal government and the nerve centre of political life in Australia.
I'm here to interview James McCann MP, who is well known for his knowledge and understanding of our political system. He is also reputed to be the up-and-coming politician, the person to watch in federal politics. I have an appointment with James McCann.
You must be Alex.
Oh, that's right, Mr. McCann. I wanted to talk to you about
Yes, I know the Constitution. Right, we better start with a quick tour. Because around this place we have a Constitution for breakfast, lunch and tea. It's behind everything we do. We fight it, we try to get around it, we try to change it, but of course it's always there and we have to live with it. This whole box and dice has been set up according to the Constitution. This little book is the blueprint for the whole place. This is the Senate, the States House.
What do you mean?
Well, in order to protect the smaller states, all the states have equal representation regardless of their size. The idea of the Senate was that it should be a place where legislation from the lower house is looked at again before being finally passed. Of course, it hasn't always worked out that way.
Why is that?
Something the fathers of the Constitution hadn't predicted. The rise of modern party politics.
So in other words, the Constitution has failed.
Now you're trying to put words into my mouth. It's worked well for 85 years. Come on, I'll show you the other side. The House of Representatives. Same design, different colour scheme. This is where most of the action takes place. The Prime Minister and most of the other ministers sit in this house. The House of Reps is democratically elected on the basis of single-member constituencies. That's my seat up there. Those of us in government sit on this side and the opposition sit over there.
So, this is where the real decisions are made.
Theoretically. Well, in practice, the day-to-day business of government is handled by the Cabinet. That's a committee of the Prime Minister and senior ministers.
The Cabinet? There's no mention of that in the Constitution I read.
Well, that's because the Constitution isn't just this piece of paper. It's also a whole group of unwritten practices and procedures, many of them based on the traditions of British Parliament. The office of Prime Minister isn't mentioned in the document itself, and neither is the Cabinet. But both are as important to our democratic Constitution as anything that's written in it. When Parliament's in session, the Prime Minister sits over here. And the ministers sit along here on what's called the front bench. Each session is opened in the Senate by the Governor-General, who represents the Queen.
At least they both get mentioned in the document.
Of course, all this is just the machinery of government. The big problem with the Constitution revolves around the division of powers. This This is section 51 of the Constitution. It's a sort of a rag-bag collection that defines the scope of the powers of the federal government.
What powers do the states have?
Well, in theory, anything that's not mentioned here.
What about in practice?
Well, things have changed over the years. The fact of the matter is that the Commonwealth has become increasingly powerful.
How can that happen if it's all so clearly defined?
Power of the purse. See, the Commonwealth has more money, and the states are dependent on what it gives them.
I see.
It's possible, if the Commonwealth wishes, to give money to the states under certain terms and conditions.
With strings attached?
They're not always very happy about that.
I'm not surprised.
Yes, when I was a minister, I didn't exactly see eye to eye with my state colleagues.
Where does it say that the Commonwealth has any power to be involved in education?
It doesn't.
Exactly. So what gives your mob the right to tell us how many schools to build?
Nothing gives us the right, Betty, but money gives us the power. And you're not getting that money unless you do what we want.
But surely that contradicts the intentions of the Founding Fathers.
Well, we don't know that. We only know what they wrote. We can't presume to know what they intended.
But it's obvious.
Not to me.
Then you're a blind, stubborn fool.
You only just realised it. Do you want the money or not?
How can I refuse?
Why are you arguing?
It's a matter of principle.
Well, what happens if you can't come to an agreement? Don't the states have any power?
Oh, yes, they can always challenge our decision in the High Court and ask for the court's interpretation of what the Constitution means. But just between you and me, we usually win.
So you see, Murray, there are problems. Even the feds admit that.
But it works.
Not according to the states.
The states will never be happy with what the federal government does.
Well, they could be happier than they are now. What's the point in having state governments if they don't have any independence?
They're independent enough.
After the legal opinion I received, I'm not so sure about that.
The High Court has two primary functions. The first is as the final court of appeal for Australia.
Court of Appeal?
Yes, that means if you feel a court has not dealt fairly with you, then you may be given permission to appeal to a higher court and ask them to reassess the decision.
I see. Well, what's the court's other main function?
The other main role is as the interpreter of the Constitution. Invariably, this involves acting as a sort of umpire in disputes that may develop with the states or other bodies that feel they may have a case.
What sort of disputes are we talking about?
Oh, any manner of things. In the 1950s, the Communist Party took the Commonwealth government to the High Court over its plans to outlaw the party. A footballer challenged his football league's power to refuse him a clearance to a team in another state. The states challenged the Commonwealth over who owned any oil and gas that might be found offshore. I mean, it's impossible to make a generalised view of the types of cases.
But in all of them, the High Court's decision was critical.
No, not critical. Final, decisive, conclusive, definitive. Once the High Court has made a decision, the case ends.
But I don't quite see why the Constitution needs to be interpreted. Surely if it is a clear-cut legal document, it should have only one meaning.
My dear, you are asking a lot.
Why? If the federal government has power over, say, customs and excise duties, well, what's there to argue about?
Well, masses of things. What, for instance, constitutes an excise duty? Is it all sales tax? Or is it something other than a sales tax? If the state government was put a tax on the sale of paper, for instance, and call it a consumption tax, is that just another name for excise duty and therefore the province of the Commonwealth? I mean, sorting those sorts of problems out can take days, weeks, months even. And the final decision may rest on very subtle interpretations of the words.
But can the High Court actually change the Constitution?
Well, yes and no.
Thanks very much.
Well, no, it doesn't change the actual words of the Constitution, but yes, in that it can affect the meanings attached to those words.
That sounds fair enough, but I think I'd like an example.
Very well. Consider the case of the King against Brislan ex parte Williams.
Do you insist?
A little old lady from Redfern, one Dulcie Williams, was prosecuted for not having a radio licence. She challenged the prosecution in the High Court on the grounds that the Constitution did not give the Commonwealth powers over radio broadcasting, as it was not mentioned in Section 51.
That sounds fair enough.
Well, not according to the court. They held that radio broadcasting was covered under Section 51 by the words postal, telegraphic and other like services. You see, radio broadcasting hadn't been invented when the Constitution was drawn up.
So the High Court brought the Constitution up to date?
Well, more or less. That case was in 1935. But there's another interesting case, much more recent. You may remember it. It had to do with the federal government's battle to stop the Tasmanian government building a dam on the Franklin River.
Oh, yes, of course.
This case clearly shows how the High Court's interpretations have affected the balance of powers between the Commonwealth and the states. See, it all has to do with the fact that the Franklin River was listed under an international treaty as a World Heritage Area.
Clearly, Your Honours, the case is simple. The Franklin River is part of the state of Tasmania. The Tasmanian government wishes to put a dam across the river to enable the construction of a hydroelectric plant. To deny the state the right to build the dam is to deny it the right to its own territory. The Constitution does not give the Commonwealth the power to interfere with this right. The Franklin Dam must be built.
Yeah, that's right. The federal government's got no right sticking its nose in the affairs of the state.
I don't know. It may be important that everyone should have a say in it, not just the state.
Rubbish.
Listen to this.
Your Honours, the Commonwealth case rests on these points. First, under the Constitution, the Commonwealth is given power over external affairs. Acting under this power, and on behalf of all Australians, the federal government has entered into a number of treaties. In one treaty, the signatories agree to protect and preserve items of significant world heritage. The Franklin River region is one such area. The Parliament has legislated to give effect to its treaty obligations to protect the region. That legislation is valid and overrides state legislation which permits construction of the dam.
Oh, what a load of old cobblers.
It makes sense to me.
Max, it's twaddle. Talk about taking the long way home.
Well, what's the point of making an agreement if you can't enforce them?
Well, what right have they got making agreements like that anyway?
They are the government, Bill.
But only of Australia, not Tasmania. Surely the mob in Hobart know better about what to do in their own backyard than some smart Alex up in Canberra.
You don't have to know much to realise that a dam in the area would be a disaster for such an important piece of countryside.
Oh, says who? Anyway, if the Tasmanians want to do their own thing, well, then just let them. It's no one's business but their own.
Oh, come on. We're all Australians. Just because the river happens to be in Tasmania doesn't mean the rest of the world can't take an interest in it.
Commonwealth won the case, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, and the federal government got another feather in its cap.
I believe there is a certain inevitability about it. Still, it did generate a lot of interest in the Constitution.
Yeah, but is it the best way to make changes?
What do you mean?
Well, it seems to me that the Constitution is such an important thing that it shouldn't be left in the hands of judges.
Why ever not? The judges are experts at these things.
Oh, but they're hardly representatives of the people.
Of course not, heaven forbid.
But the Constitution ultimately belongs to the people. It's our contract, if you like. I mean, that's the way it starts. Whereas the people of New South Wales, Victoria, etc.
Yes, that's right.
So the people should have a say.
They do. That's what referendums are for.
Oh, but referendums don't seem to work. Most important changes take place as a result of the actions of the High Court.
It's not the fault of the High Court that referendums rarely bring about change.
But there must be a better way.
I'm just a barrister. It's not my field.
Is it anybody's field? Let's face it, Alex.
Murray, we haven't finished yet.
To date, there have been only 8 referendum proposals accepted out of the 38 that have been put to the people. They're pretty long odds.
But why is it so difficult to get the proposals accepted?
If I knew the answer to that, Alex, I'd be a Prime Minister, not a professor.
There must be some theories.
Oh, dozens of theories.
Oh.
But I think it is possible to isolate a few of the main factors. Firstly, the difficulty in obtaining a majority. Second, the conservatism of the population. And last but not least, referendums are political.
Can you explain the first point?
Oh, Yes, the majorities. You see, the provision for changing the Constitution is Section 128. It's over here, in the last section. For a referendum proposal to be carried, it has to be passed by a majority of electors in a majority of states. In other words, it is no good if it's passed overwhelmingly in New South Wales and Victoria if the 4 smaller states don't approve it.
Was it intended that it should be so difficult to change the Constitution?
No, not at all. In fact, the Founding Fathers believed they were making change too easy.
Why was that?
The public voted very strongly in favour of federation. Here, 1899. It seems that was the first and the last time there was any widespread agreement and enthusiasm for a controversial issue. Since then, the only referendums to be passed have been uncontroversial ones.
Oh, such as?
Retirement of judges at age 70, removing discrimination against Aborigines, that sort of thing.
Why is that?
My point too. The conservatism of the electorate. People are suspicious of change.
Is that because they don't trust the politicians?
Well, that is part of the answer. Ignorance is another. Very few people know anything about the Constitution. Don't understand the changes that are proposed, so they vote against them.
Your last point, politics and referendums. What's the connection?
Timing. You see, referendums are usually held at the same time as elections. As a rule, the government of the day is the sponsor for the referendum proposals. The opposition then opposes the proposal, just to be difficult.
But that doesn't have to happen, does it?
No. And every now and again, something does happen that gives everyone heart. Take the 1977 proposals, for instance. 3 out of 4 of the proposed changes to the Constitution were accepted. Now, that is pretty good going, considering that before that, only 5 out of 32 of the proposed changes had been accepted.
But why were the 1977 referendum proposals successful?
The difference between the 1977 proposals and previous ones is that they were backed by a constitutional convention.
I think you better keep explaining.
It's a convention of politicians. It recognises that some sort of consensus between parties and government is necessary before change can take place.
That makes sense.
It's a step in the right direction. But ultimately, the decision to make change rests with the people through their votes. No matter what changes a politician might propose, it's the people who must approve them.
We're back where we started.
Yeah, with the people. Isn't that the way it should be?
I suppose. After all, it is our Constitution.
Right. And there's nothing sacred about it. We can change it if we want to.
If we want to.
Oh, come on, Murray. Even you must agree with Alex that some things need to be revised.
Right. We'll have to do something about it sometime.
Why? I reckon we should just let sleeping dogs lie. Anyway, if the changes are suggested by the politicians, there's got to be something shady about it.
I wouldn't go quite so far as that.
I always vote no on principle, just to get up their noses.
But some things aren't working anymore. They need to be changed.
Give me one example.
Family law. At the moment, the Commonwealth has control over children born inside a marriage and the state has control over children born outside a marriage. I mean, that seems stupid to me.
Well, that's right. All the changes that have taken place in society as a result of new technology need to be reflected in the Constitution.
But the courts do that.
But what if we don't agree with what the judges have to say? I mean, I think we should be more democratic.
But we don't know enough about it. It's the business of the judges to be the experts.
Why do we need experts on what's right and wrong? I mean, you know best what's best for you.
Now, just a minute.
I'm not suggesting there are any easy solutions, Murray.
Yeah, I can see that. Do you know that problem of children of a marriage?
It needs looking into?
Yeah. Mind you, I'm not conceding the point, but I can see it's worth thinking about.
Well, that's good, because as it says in the beginning, whereas the people. We are the people, and we should make sure that our Constitution does what we want it to do.